Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host joining me today is Danielson.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we do have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you could do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast. For just $6.66 a month, you can enjoy weekly premium audio episodes and access to our entire back catalog of over 280 plus episodes that are all ad free.
Or if you're a big baller and you want to see our faces an extra time each week, then you can sign up to our premium video service, which is only $9.99. And you can do that by going to theoriesofthethirdkind.com. Right there in the middle of our website, it's going to be a little Supercast button. You can click on it, it'll take you over there, and you can sign up. It takes less than 30 seconds to do.
Now, we know things are tough out there right now, so if you can't afford a premium membership but you still want to help us out, you can do so by leaving us a written review on iTunes or Spotify.
Or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel where we post our regular videos on there, and we do not run ads or earn money on any of those videos.
Now, don't feel pressure to leave us, a comment or anything like that. If you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoot, Sasquatches, chupacabras, ghosts, Illuminati members, underground lizard people, whoever, whatever you are, to enjoy the show. Also, remember, our content is entirely human-made. No AI were used or harmed in the process other than for the base graphic.
Yeah, for some reason, people think that this video is all AI done and that we're all AI characters.
I know, right?
I mean, I feel like I'm on a Japanese Bible. Is this AI, huh? Huh? I've been fucking hiking. And I'm drinking on the job.
You should do that right when you go to flex. You just increase your muscles, just like, this is AI.
All right. So that right there is the end of the announcements. So today's episode is about a red demon-like creature that has been lurking in the shadows of Detroit, Michigan for over 300 years.
Damn.
This creature is a demon that is called the Nain Rouge. And I just want to clarify something. There has been multiple different pronunciations of this cryptid. I have watched so many news stations in Detroit pronounce this completely different. Some pronounce it Nain Rouge, Nan Rouge, Non Rouge, Na Rouge.
Na Rouge.
Yeah, just a bunch of different ways. So we're just going to pronounce it Nain Rouge, okay? Now, descriptions of this creature vary over the years. However, the majority of sightings all state that it's a child-sized goblin with a bright red face, glowing red eyes, and pointed, sharp teeth. Also, sometimes it is wearing black fur or a tattered fur coat. It has the face of an old man, rotting teeth, and whenever it laughs, it sounds like a crow's call. Interesting.
What the hell does a crow sound like again?
Oh, call.
So that's a laugh. Ha ha.
Ha 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 ha. That's what it sounds like.
So throughout the centuries, seeing the Nain Rouge is supposed to be an omen of misfortune. It is sort of like the Mothman. Individuals have blamed this little red demon for everything from military defeats to even catastrophic fires and riots. So that is a basic description of what the Nain Rouge is, but how did it all start?
Well, that is what we are going to go over in today's episode. We're going to start at the very beginning, before Detroit was even a city, and talk about the natives in that area and what had occurred. From there, we're going to follow this cryptid's footsteps through time, from battles in the 1760s and sightings in more recent decades, even up until the early 2000s when it was trying to break into cars and alleyways. Yeah.
Hmm.
So with that being said, let's start off with today's episode.
All right. So our story starts way back in the late 1600s. During this time, the shores of Lake Erie and the Detroit River were home to a bunch of indigenous people. Now, these indigenous people in that area were thriving and their communities were deeply connected to the land and water, and they were guided by their own beliefs.
Now, one of the most important things that these native people believed in was a powerful Manitou. Now, a Manitou is a guardian spirit that is said to watch over the area where these natives lived, specifically in the rivers and lakes, if they lived near that sort of thing. Since this spirit was super important to the natives, they ended up crafting an idol that represented it.
Now, it was a wooden, human shaped figure that was painted vivid red and decorated with offerings. The natives would then honor this spirit by holding ceremonies around this large human shaped red wooden idol.
So, needless to say, this was very important to the indigenous people in that area. And I want you to keep that in mind because it plays a very important role in this entire story.
All right, so let's jump to the year 1670. Now, during this time, two French priest missionaries who were in Montreal were preparing for a major expedition. The church had given these two French priests two goals for this expedition.
They wanted them to spread Christianity by converting the indigenous people of the surrounding rivers and lakes, and they wanted to open new fur trading routes for France, whose economy was practically addicted to beaver pelts at the time. They
Oh, yeah.
fucking wanted so many of those things.
Give me that beaver pelt.
I love me a big brown beaver.
Also, something else worth mentioning is that the church at that time, they didn't view the indigenous people's spiritual practices as different. The indigenous people's beliefs were labeled as superstitions, false beliefs, and even influences of the devil. Also, the church never specifically ordered these French missionaries to destroy idols or spiritual things of the indigenous people. However, the church's stance made it very obvious. If you see something that looks like pagan worship, you confront it. So, with us knowing that, we're going to move forward with the story.
Yeah. So, like we stated earlier, the year is 1670, and these two French priest missionaries left Montreal on a major expedition, and they had two goals. They wanted to convert the natives to Christianity and open new fur trading routes. They got to get those beavers. Now, the two priests loaded up their canoes and began paddling down the St. Lawrence River. They continued paddling, eventually passing through Lake Ontario and then passed through the roaring wall of Niagara Falls.
So, after Niagara Falls, they hit land and had to carry their canoes and supplies overland for a few days until eventually reaching water again. They continued paddling westward along Lake Erie, the shoreline rising and falling beside them in long stretches of dense forest. And every so often, they would pass an indigenous village tucked back from the water or hear distant voices echoing through the trees.
Now, for the most part, though, the lake was quiet. It was just the sounds of the waves slapping up against their canoes and the occasional bird overhead just cawing, call, call. But then, as the priest hugged the southern coastline, something unusual caught their attention. Just beyond the tree line was a small clearing, almost like nature had carved out a window facing the lake. And standing right in the middle of it was something they could not immediately make sense of.
It wasn't an animal, it wasn't a trail marker, and it wasn't a natural formation. It was a striking red humanoid figure standing upright and unmistakably carved by human hands.
Its surface was painted a vivid red, and it was decorated with feathers, offerings, and tokens that glimmered faintly even at a distance. The figure faced the water, almost as though it was silently watching over the lake and the travelers who passed through it.
Now, the priests decided to get a closer look at this idol, so they steered their canoe towards the shore. They got close enough to the shore, got out, pulled their boats up onto the land. Then the priests walked, through the forest clearing and approached the idol.
As they inspected the idol more closely, they knew it was no ordinary object. To them, it was a bold example of pagan worship, and it was placed openly right there in the landscape that they were passing along. And it was at this point that the priests looked at each other and they were like, yeah, we got to fucking destroy this thing.
So they got out an axe and blessed it with holy water. So they blessed the axe with holy water, said their prayers for protection, and then hacked away at the idol. The wooden idol began splintering, its red paint flaked away, and eventually it was chopped into multiple pieces. As it laid on the ground in pieces, the priest condemned it as a demon and then burned the rest of it to purify the area.
Of course, the priests see this as a victory. They think they've just won a small battle for Christianity. So they ended up going back to their canoes, they got into them, and they continued paddling westward.
This starts to remind me of The Last Kingdom. Yes, you got me hooked on that.
Ah, show's so good. So good.
Now, a short time later, the natives discover what the French priests did, and they are now pissed off and upset. To them, the priests had just desecrated a sacred object, and even worse, they had insulted a spirit whose powers shaped the winds, storms, and waters.
Now, according to legend, two very important things happened after this. The elder natives decided to curse all the Frenchmen and the land in that area, which that land would eventually become Detroit.
Also, the natives stated that the spirit that was inside of this idol ended up escaping after it was destroyed. This escaped spirit would manifest itself into a red, fiery eyed creature that would roam the area.
And that is what happened. And a lot of people would kind of disregard this as nonsense. However, what happened next began to make people believe that, hey, maybe this is true. Maybe that did happen.
All right, so now we're going to fast forward a few decades later to 1701. It had been over 30 years since the two French priest mercenaries, not mercenaries, missionaries.
Fucking priest mercenaries. That'd be a great movie. In the name of God.
I keep thinking of The Last Kingdom, the
Great show.
priest Pilger.
Pilger. I think it starts with an N. The priest.
Oh.
Not Pilger, but no.
All right, so we're going to fast forward a few decades later to 1701. It had been over 30 years since the two French priests burned down the idol, chopped it up and spit on it too, probably. Now, France was preparing to send out another expedition, but this time they aren't just exploring. Instead, they are wanting to build a permanent settlement in the very region where those priests had passed through.
In Montreal, preparations began for this major new expedition. The leader of this expedition was a French aristocrat and adventurer named Antoine de Lamont Cadillac. Now, Cadillac was a confident but also arrogant man. He was eager to make his fortune in the New World through the fur trade, just trading beavers out, and governing this new colony that they were going to call Fort Pontchartrain, eventually Fort Detroit.
So, in the spring of 1701, Cadillac assembled roughly 100 men in Montreal and prepared to travel west into the same waters where the Red Idol once stood, unaware of the actions that took place decades earlier.
Now, there's something very important to note here. Before his expedition, Cadillac received a strange warning. On the night of March 10th, 1701, a grand party was held in Quebec to honor Cadillac and his upcoming expedition. During this party, a mysterious old woman with a black cat perched on her shoulder made her way through the crowd and stood in front of Cadillac.
Her name was Marie Monique, and she was a sorcerer and fortune teller. Marie stood there in front of Cadillac and the gathered officials and told him of a prophecy that she had seen. She stated that Cadillac's new settlement would indeed become a great city, one day filled with more people than all of New France at the time. However, she gave him one crucial piece of advice, and she said,
Appease the Nain Rouge. Beware of offending this demon of the strait. If you do not, then not a vestige of your inheritance will be given to your heirs. Your name will be scarcely known in the city you founded.
That is what the sorcerer said, and then she walked back into the crowd, away from Cadillac, and left the party. So basically, what she told him was, there's a demon where you're going, treat him well, or you will lose all your fortune, and it'll suck.
All right, so let's fast forward to the summer of 1701. Cadillac and about 100 men, soldiers, traders, and missionaries, set up camp and built a wooden fort by the water, which was near where this idol was destroyed decades earlier.
Now, the fort prospered in its early years. Cadillac negotiated with the local tribes, and other people moved into that area to trade and became allies with the French. And for a while, things went well. Just as the sorcerer had stated, he was on track to greatness. But then, the fateful encounter happened.
It was around the year 1707, 6 years after Detroit was founded. It was a humid summer evening by the Detroit River, and Cadillac and his wife decided to take a leisurely walk outside of the walls of the fort. As they were walking along, they were watching the sunset in the distance and enjoying the view.
They began to overhear some settlers gossiping in low voices about a recent sighting of a little red man in the forest. At this time, Cadillac's wife remembers the eerie warning from the sorcerer years earlier.
Beware of the Nain Rouge.
She urges her husband to remember that advice and to be cautious. Cadillac scoffs and sort of brushes off her words, like, hey, fuck that little red guy.
Yeah, that's basically what he says. But as they continue walking, something odd happened shortly after that. Out of the darkness of a nearby tree line, a small, child-sized, red humanoid with red glowing eyes comes out of the forest. This devil-like creature jumps right onto the walking path, standing just a few feet in front of Cadillac and his wife.
The couple just stood there, frozen, staring at this hideous little figure. They described the creature as dwarf-like, covered in reddish fur, with a contorted face. It had glowing red eyes, pointed teeth, and a grin that was somewhere between a laugh and a snarl.
As they stood there in shock, this creature emits a strange, cackling shriek that was a half laugh but half bird like screech. Was that close enough? I would be like, what the fuck? Are you okay, you little bitch? That's what I'd be like. So
I feel like that's the noise like when someone jumps out and like flashes someone.
Get out of my way, you little red pervert.
He's flashing us.
Anyway, so he does the cackle. What happens? What happens next, Dan?
Now, instead of appeasing this creature, like Cadillac was told to do, he instead decided to lash out at it. Cadillac lunges forward, swinging his cane, hitting the creature while yelling,
"Get out of my way, you red ant bitch."
Now, the Nain Rouge tumbles back, then quickly scrambles to its feet. The creature lets out an eerie laughter and then runs off in a dark forest, vanishing as swiftly as it came.
Now, Cadillac goes back to the fort with his wife, and they tell everyone about what had just happened. During this time, his wife is worried about the prophecy and states that he, Cadillac, should have appeased the creature. What do you mean appease? What are you supposed to jerk it off in the damn roadway? What do you mean appease it?
Yeah, like what was he supposed to do?
Hey, man, cool. Nice laugh.
Cool.
See you later.
Great landing.
Yeah. I don't know. But Cadillac calls that nonsense and states, hey, nothing bad's going to happen. I just smacked the little bitch with my cane. You know, it's going to be all right.
However, though, not too long after that incident happened, Cadillac's life in Detroit begins to unravel. He got into trouble with his superiors and the law, and by 1710, accusations of abuse of power and illicit trade swirled around him. The once promising commander was summoned to Quebec to answer for his misdeeds.
Eventually, Cadillac was removed from his post in Detroit and transferred to a less prestigious position in Louisiana. His misfortunes only continued. He later returned to France, where he was briefly imprisoned and lost his fortune, failing to secure the wealth and legacy he had dreamed of.
In the end, Cadillac died quietly, and his name was barely known in the city he founded. The settlers in Detroit around this time heard of Cadillac's downfall along with his death.
Whispers of the Nain Rouge grew around the settlers. They began to wonder, hey, this demon cursed the founder of the city. Maybe it cursed the city itself. However, they wouldn't have to wait long to figure that out.
Because now we're going to jump to the 1760s, almost 50 years later. During this time, Detroit is no longer under French control, and it's now a British-held fort. Britain took over after defeating France in the French and Indian War in 1760.
Yeah.
Get wrecked.
Now, during this period, tensions are high in the region. The indigenous tribes, they kind of had a better relationship with the French. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't like super bad. However, they're pretty angry at the new British occupiers' policies. They're like, man, fuck the British. We want the French back.
Then in 1763, a great tribal leader, Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa, he launches an uprising known as Pontiac's Rebellion. He rallies warriors from a bunch of different tribes in the area and tells them to resist British forts that are across the Great Lakes.
In May of 1763, Pontiac decides to lay siege to Fort Detroit itself, hoping to drive the British out of it. For weeks during that summer, Detroit was under siege, surrounded by Pontiac's forces.
And by late July, the British inside the fort were growing desperate to break the siege. And on the night of July 30th, 1763, a British detachment of 247 soldiers snuck out of Fort Detroit. Their plan was to launch a surprise pre-dawn attack on Pontiac's camp a few miles up the river at a creek called Parents Creek.
Now, the night was dark and eerily quiet as these 247 soldiers marched along the river's edge, wanting to surprise Pontiac's, crew that was just chilling there, in front of the fort. Well, a few miles away from the Fort Detroit, actually. It was the Pontiac settlement that they were heading to. Now, as the captain of these 247 soldiers moved his men into position, he began to wonder, I'm seeing something out of the corner of my eye. I think we're being followed by a shadowy small figure that's in the water nearby. And he kept looking towards the water, the captain did. as his troops quietly made their way into position.
As they're going, the captain continued to catch little glimpses of this small little creature following them. He described it as being the size of a small child. It had a pair of red eyes, and on a few occasions, he swore that he heard it laugh at him. However, his men stated that it was the sound of birds.
Eventually, the captain got his men into position, and in the early hours of July 31st, 1763, the British forces approached the creek near Pontiac's encampment. But the element of surprise was lost. You see, at the time, the French, they didn't really fuck with the British at all. They actually kind of fucking hated them. And they decided to team up with the natives in the area. And some of the French heard about heard about the British sneaking out of the fort and doing this surprise attack. So what the French do? They went and snitched on them British people. They were like, "Hey, some British people are sneaking around. They're gonna hit you up without you knowing, and they're gonna like ta 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 on your bitch ass. So you better get ready." So the natives were already ready, and the British troops walked right into an ambush.
The British fought desperately to retreat, but the narrow path became a killing ground. The captain was struck down, and he was beheaded. His head was displayed on a pike outside of Fort Detroit's wall, sending a signal to the people inside.
All right. So there you are. The British couldn't surprise the Pontiac forces who were laying siege to them because the French snitched on them. And the captain got his head chopped off and set on a pike right in front of Fort Detroit. Also, the waters of Parents Creek, which was the creek that they battled on, and a lot of them died. That creek literally ran red with blood from the British soldiers. And ever since, that stream has been known as Bloody Run.
Now, besides the captain, did anyone else see the Nain Rouge during this battle? Well, some of the British soldiers did survive, and they swore that they saw a small, red faced creature dancing among the corpses along the creek bank.
That's kind of scary.
It was Pennywise.
Yeah. Now, in regards to the siege of Detroit, well, it continued for a couple more months, but eventually Pontiac withdrew in October of 1763 without taking the fort. After 1763, Detroit remained under British and later American control, and stories of the Nain Rouge did not die out. If anything, they kind of just simmered down and were passed on in whispers. Soldiers, settlers, and later American pioneers were warned, hey, if you see a strange red dwarf on a dark night, beware, something bad is about to happen.
So, as the decades passed, the legend of the Nain Rouge was kept alive in Detroit's folklore. Parents might hush unruly children by saying, "Be good, or the red dwarf will get you. Gonna get you."
It's going to get you.
Now, old timers claim their grandparents had actually seen the creature, but it wasn't until the late 1800s that we get another documented sighting.
One famous account comes from the year 1884. Detroit by then was an industrializing city lit by gas lamps at night and streetcars by day. According to a newspaper report that year, a Detroit woman claimed she was attacked by a bizarre creature late one night in October of 1884.
Now, that woman said her assailant was a baboon with a horned head, brilliant, restless eyes, and a devilish smile on its face. The creature supposedly pounced on her out of a dark alley, scratching and clawing. She screamed and began fighting this creature off.
Neighbors heard the commotion and came to her aid. Upon arriving, they saw a small, shadowy creature scurry away into the darkness. And like we stated, this incident was written up in the local press, and the reaction to it by the locals there at the time was a little mixed.
Some of the residents laughed at the story and said that the lady must have had an encounter with a stray wild animal. However, some of the locals were scared. Detroit's French old-timers were going around telling people that this was the creature known as the Nain Rouge, and it was on the prowl again.
Now, these types of sightings would continue to occur throughout the years. However, by the mid 20th century, not everyone in Detroit took the Nain Rouge seriously, of course. It was something you might hear around a campfire, a spooky story for a Halloween column in a newspaper, or just, somebody just talking shit. But that would change in the late 1960s when Detroit was rocked by disaster, and witnesses claim the Nain Rouge showed his face before the worst of it.
So Detroit's most notorious modern disaster was the 12th Street riot of July of 1967. It was one of the largest and deadliest urban uprising in American history, born of racial tensions and poverty. And just as the Mothman is said to have appeared before the 1967 Silver Bridge collapse in West Virginia, Detroit's own omen of misfortune supposedly made an appearance before and during the 1967 chaos.
As the legend goes, on the night of July 22nd, 1967, mere hours before the riot ignited, some Detroit residents spotted a strange small figure darting around 12th Street, which is now Rosa Parks Boulevard, under the streetlights. Multiple eyewitnesses' accounts state that a red dwarf was seen dashing down the sidewalk, doing backflips and cartwheels as if it was giddy with anticipation of the violence that was about to erupt.
And sure enough, in the early hours of July 23rd, a police raid on an illegal bar on 12th Street snowballed into a full blown riot. Over the next 5 days, Detroit was engulfed in flames and gunfire. 43 people lost their lives, hundreds were injured, and entire city blocks were burned and looted.
Not long after that, another bizarre encounter with the Nain Rouge occurred, this time just before a freak weather event. In late March of 1976, Michigan was hit by a monumental ice storm. It was one of the worst in its history.
2 days prior to the storm, on a chilly night, two Detroit utility workers were out on a routine job near Downriver, south of Detroit. As they shined a flashlight up at a utility pole, they noticed what looked like a small person climbing on it. They initially thought maybe it was a child pulling a prank on them.
However, the little person leaped off of the top of the pole and landed softly on the ground below, something that no human would dare do from that height. They got a good look at it and stated that it was about 3 or 4 feet tall, covered in some type of ragged fur, and had a really weird face.
After landing on the ground, the creature then let out a raspy, cawing laugh, much like a crow's call, and sprinted away in the darkness before they could catch up. The workers stood there, hearts pounding, wondering, did we just see the Nain Rouge?
So they ended up reporting it, and only 48 hours later, on March 24th, 1976, a massive ice storm slammed the region, knocking out power for days. Detroit and its suburbs were coated in inches of ice. Trees and power lines were downed everywhere.
All right, so following that, the Nain Rouge was not spotted for decades. Then, in the autumn of 1996, it happened. It appeared.
In the early morning hours, two Detroit clubgoers stumbled out of the bar, a little tipsy. As they began walking home, they heard a weird cawing noise, like a crow, and it was echoing in a nearby alleyway. They decided to walk to the nearby alleyway and look down it, and spotted a small, hunched over man messing with a parked car's window as if he was attempting to break into it.
All right, so the two drunks decided to shout at this person, thinking it was just some unlucky, short thief trying to break into a car. But as the figure turned towards them, they felt a jolt of fear. Even in their drunken state, they saw the unnatural red gleam in the man's eyes and noticed he was wearing what looked like a ratty old fur coat despite the mild weather.
The creature, aka Homeless Man, let out a snarling hiss or caw, then slammed the car door and bolted away with inhuman speed. Now, this story would later be published, and since the witnesses were drunk at the time, many of the readers took it with a grain of salt and didn't believe them. But they swore that that's what they had seen.
So I would, just because of the sound. How do you get a call and a snarling hiss confused?
I don't know. These homeless people out here be, they're on crack. They got superpowers.
That is true.
I seen one of them climb a utility pole like that man was saying, like a fucking black bear, dude.
Do they can climb too?
Yeah, he's like, watch me. And he's like, my name Bling Bling. And he had crack in his collar and he'd pull out his crack pipe and fucking smoke it. And then he'd climb up utility poles. And then he'd be like, watch this. And he'd fucking touch the electrical line and then fall down and then get back up and smoke some more crack and do it again.
And when he fell, he landed on his feet too.
Yeah, Bling Bling. He wears his crack pipe in his collar.
Now, by the 2000s, Detroit had embraced the Nain Rouge, not only as a spooky folktale, but as a symbol of the city's spirit. Rather than cower in fear of the red dwarf demon, some residents decided it was time to have a little fun with their local demon. Well, that's where you fucked up.
In 2010, a group of creative residents started something new, the March of the Nain Rouge. It's an annual tradition held each spring around the time of the vernal equinox in March.
So it's essentially a big parade and costume party in Detroit, where they burn an effigy of the Nain. It's pretty much a way for the community to come together to symbolically drive the Nain Rouge out of the city for another year, thus banishing bad luck.
Now, as of today, there have been no major sightings of the Nain Rouge in the 21st century. However, if you or a loved one have been to Detroit or the area surrounding it and you have spotted a little red demon creature, then please let us know. You can comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can send us an email if you're listening to us on Spotify.
Or you can give us a call.
Yes. And what is our hotline number, Dan?
707-390-0655.
Leave us a voicemail. When you call it, neither of us are going to answer, so you don't got to worry about that.
Hello?
It's going to go straight to voicemail, and you can just leave us a 3-minute voicemail. That's the maximum allotted time. If you got a story longer than that, you can call back again and leave another one, but don't leave more than 2 back to back, please. We'll play it on an upcoming episode. All right. So with that being said, that is what the Nain Rouge is, the history of it, and a few sightings throughout the years. However, just like every week, our episode does not stop here, because now we're going to get into the strange facts and findings surrounding this topic.
So our first strange fact and finding is called publishing. So as we were researching this topic, we decided to figure out when this Nain Rouge was first mentioned in a book.
What we discovered was that in 1883, a Detroit historian named Marie Carolyn Watson Hamlin had published a book called Legends of La Detroit. In it, she compiled many old stories such as Cadillac's Encounter, the Red Idol Tale, and much more.
Now, we tried to find any 18th or 19th century documents, such as journals, letters, official records, anything written that describes the Nain Rouge. However, there was nothing.
The Nain Rouge story does not appear in mid-1700s or early 1800s colonial records, and like we stated earlier, the earliest written record dates from 1883, nearly 180 years after the events took place. Outside of Hamlin's 1883 book, there is no reliable trace of the legend in earlier sources.
Which that makes you wonder if the story of the Nain Rouge was just created, and if so, why? However, we will save our theories for the theory section, so let's go on to our next strange fact and finding.
All right, so our next strange fact and finding is called 1800s newspaper. So as we were digging through old Detroit newspapers, we came across a strange story from the late 1880s. This story claimed that the red dwarf wasn't native to Michigan at all.
French trappers spoke of a petit lutin rouge, a mischievous but dangerous water spirit that haunted river crossings in Quebec and the Ottawa Valley, long before Cadillac ever dreamed of Detroit. The article implies that the spirit followed the French westward, trailing them along the St. Louis waterways all the way to the Strait of Detroit.
Now, this claim is strange because it suggests that the Nain Rouge hitched a ride with the colonists, and it reframes the Nain not as Detroit's curse, but as something different, something that kind of latched on to the French and came along the ride, and kind of settled there in Detroit, like a spirit or something, which is very odd.
Were they the ones that put the idol there?
Who?
These other French trappers.
No, the French trappers didn't. It was the indigenous people that put the idol there. They're the ones who worshiped it and everything.
But this is saying that it came with the trappers or followed it, right?
What do you mean came with it?
The 1880s, it said that the dwarf wasn't native to Michigan at all.
Mm-hmm.
It followed the trapper, or followed the trappers, right? Yeah, the French westward.
Yeah. So what they're saying is, okay, still there's the indigenous people that believed in this water spirit, the Manitou. This water spirit or spirit that controlled the weather and everything. They still built this idol. It was still red and everything. It was still chopped down and all that stuff. But what this article is stating is that the spirit of the Nain Rouge did not come from the idol being chopped down and burned up, that it was already with the French trappers or these French trappers that ended up coming over and settling in that area, that somebody had brought this spirit over to Detroit, that it wasn't in the area with the indigenous people, and having their idol desecrated is what unleashed it. It's that the French brought it over with them.
So it wasn't unleashed from the idol.
That's what the original story states.
That's the original story. This one is saying that the French brought it over.
Yeah. That's what the 1880s newspaper article states.
So that means it was totally different from the red idol, or like the creature that would have been for the red idol.
Yeah, it's only being the Nain Rouge is only being connected to the Red Idol due to what
Appearances, I guess.
the French priest missionaries did to that idol and how it looked just like the Nain Rouge.
Okay, so that's where it got me confused.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to our next strange fact and finding.
All right, so this next strange fact and finding is called the 1970s. This states that in the 1970s, Detroit police quietly logged multiple sightings of a small red creature during fires, riots, and blackout events, and the descriptions were almost identical.
Now, these reports were never officially published, but retired officers and dispatch workers have told surprisingly consistent stories. Many of them were interviewed and they stated, like, hey, we didn't correctly identify or correctly write down what these people were saying, but almost every time they'd say a child sized figure in red was running near burning buildings, a red faced, long limbed shaped creature was perched on rooftops before emergency calls came in. A laughing, cackling noise was heard in alleyways right before transformers exploded during a blackout. That is what they consistently stated.
And now these witnesses were not ordinary civilians. They were trained observers, cops, firefighters, EMS, and their descriptions lined up almost exactly with the folklore version of the Nain Rouge. Also, most of them weren't even aware of the legend of the Nain Rouge.
Now, many of the reports were filed as, and we quote, possible juvenile suspect unidentified, because none of them wanted to write down, hey, we saw a demon in an official incident report. Many researchers call this period in Detroit the Nain Rouge wave because of how concentrated the sightings were. An investigator went and investigated this and started talking to the police and EMS workers and call center people who were retired who had worked around that time period. And all of them had stated the same thing, that they had saw a bunch of weird shit going on in the 1970s of a small red creature in the area.
Wasn't this like during the time of where demons were a big thing?
Satanic panic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so our last strange fact and finding is called the occult. Now, Detroit has long been a hotspot for occult groups, and at least two of them believe the Nain Rouge wasn't a demon, but a protector they tried to summon. And this is one of the strangest twists in Detroit's underground history.
So Detroit had several occult societies active between 1890 and the 1940s, and it included spiritualist lodges, ceremonial magic groups, magic with a K, French descended folk Catholic circles, and proto Wiccan nature worship groups. I'm not sure exactly what any of those are, but I can only guess that they're occult groups that worship some type of beings.
Yeah, I heard of Wiccan, but not proto Wiccan.
Yeah.
Anyways, two of these groups, according to recovered ritual notes, believed the Nain Rouge was not a curse, but a guardian spirit that Detroit desperately needed in times of crisis. Their logic was wild, but consistent. The Nain appears before disasters. What if he's not causing them, but what if he's actually warning us?
So these groups attempted rituals designed to invite the Nain Rouge, not repel him. And their writings describe red candles forming a spiral, offerings made near the river, chanting in a mix of French and indigenous words, and attempts to, and we quote, call forth the watcher of the strait. And that right there is our last strange fact and finding. So some occult groups between 1890 to 1940s, at least two of them were trying to summon the Nain Rouge because they believed it was a spirit that helped warn of events.
So they believe like what the indigenous people did. Or
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that being said, let's go to our theories section. And Dan, why don't you start it off and tell us our first theory as to what this Nain Rouge could be?
All right. So our first theory is called the broken spirit theory. This theory states that the Nain Rouge is actually the surviving spirit of the red idol that was destroyed by the French priest in 1670. In the indigenous people's tradition, the spirit inside the idol, the Manitou, it can shift, reform, or become twisted when sacred objects tied to them are desecrated. When the priest smashed it up, cut it up, burned the idol on Lake Erie, the spirit may have been enraged and escaped, torturing and haunting the area and its inhabitants.
That's a good theory. I'm going to save my opinion till the end. But let's get on to our next theory, which is called local guardian. This theory states that the Nain Rouge is actually a protective spirit of Detroit, not a harmful one. The idea is that the Nain warns the community about danger ahead, the same way old lighthouse keepers would light a fire before a storm. People misinterpret his appearance as a curse, but the theory suggests that the Nain Rouge is just doing his job, watching the city, and then everybody gets pissed off at him. He's like, "What the fuck? I tried to warn you guys." That's what this theory states.
He's Detroit's Batman.
Pretty much. But he doesn't fight crime.
He doesn't
just
fight crime.
fights catastrophes.
He just jumps out and like flashes you,
Yeah.
lets out a cackle, runs off. I mean, I could kind of see that because maybe those like fires, it wasn't setting the fires. Maybe that laughter and stuff was to alert people. Like, say the people inside were probably sleeping or didn't know there was a fire. Then all of a sudden they hear this weird ass cackle and they're just like, what the hell is that? And then they look, oh shit, there's a fire.
What do you mean fire?
There's some of the fires in Detroit. The EMS firefighters and stuff, they said like before, like fires and
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Oh, fires are like when something bad was about to happen, like a storm or something like that? Okay.
I'm just saying for like fires, because for storms, I mean, the Nain Rouge didn't do shit for the storm. If
Yeah.
anything, it probably distracted the workers.
What about the riots? They're like, uh-oh.
I don't know, maybe it incited those. It has to have, it's like a chaotic good.
Yeah. All right. Tell us about this next theory.
All right, so this next theory is called misidentified animal. According to this theory, the earliest sightings of the Nain Rouge may have been misidentified wildlife, possibly a young bear, a large fox with mange, or even a wandering pet monkey brought over by a trader, which actually happened in some frontier towns. Strange animals were often described as supernatural creatures in early settlements, so a small red animal could have easily turned into the red dwarf legend.
Okay. Maybe in some of the encounters.
I mean, with Cadillac, I don't think it was a little red creature. Obviously, it jumped out, cackled, and
Yeah.
and then he hit it with the cane, so.
All right. So let's talk about our last theory, which is called a reason for the season. So this theory states that the Nain Rouge, like other creatures in folklore, was used as a way to explain horrific events to people. We create a reason for something bad happening or why a person disappears from local records. If you look through other stories like this, you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of similar stories about curses, horrific events in history, or other things that could not be explained at the time, connected to these odd, made up cryptid creatures. AKA, this theory just states that the creature is fake and made up and just connected as a way to explain things. And that's this last theory. It's a pretty good one.
It's a pretty good one.
And I'm going to ask you, Dan, do you believe that the Nain Rouge is real? If so, how was it created or what is it? And yeah, let us know what you think.
I don't think the Nain Rouge is real, but to make it sound more authentic, oh shit, the French priest destroyed this idol. That must have been it. So that's why it's haunting this area, because it's, I guess, similar. The idol looks like what could be it. And obviously, it's like the city of Detroit wanted its own symbol or
Own
creature.
Mothman.
Yeah. Because, I don't know. There's a lot of the stuff just doesn't really add up. The whole, I guess, misinterpreting the sounds it makes, but they were drunk. Like a snarling hiss to a crow sound. Then, of course, I don't know, the breaking into the car, that sounded like almost just like a short person.
Yeah, like a crazy homeless man.
Yeah, because if it was like a Nain Rouge, how small it is, it wouldn't be able to really stand up that tall to hunch over a car door.
Yeah.
So I feel like that one, they thought that they saw something, and the guy was probably just wearing red. But I think it's more so of just attaching something to something unexplained. And I mean, it's obviously fun to do. Like when you come up with an idea, it's like, how did this happen? You start thinking of things. The Nain Rouge is one of those.
I hate to say it because I want to believe that there's like a spirit wandering around, that's not really terrorizing people, but just kind of like dancing around, being like, hey, what's up? Caw, and then like running away,
Yeah.
But after looking through records and colonial records and trying to find any type of evidence that points to the French priest missionary stories or, the story of, what Cadillac stated had happened. Couldn't find nothing. And the first mention, or the earliest mention of any of those, or both of those actually, was in the 1883 book, Legends of Le Detroit. And I think that book was just created to romanticize historical mythology for the city, basically inventing the story of Cadillac encountering the Nain Rouge, because there's no evidence of the Nain Rouge being part of original French colonial folklore.
I could see if Cadillac was the founder of Detroit, him actually making up that story because he founded a city. He was doing trades with like the local tribes, and he wanted the city to thrive. And what was the one thing that was like popular? Beaver pelts.
Hmm.
With that being said, how people love beaver pelts and all that. Think this little creature had red fur. Trappers are really like, holy shit, that's going to be something rare. That could be sold for a lot. So they all friggin' rush there trying to catch this thing. That means the city gets more, activity,
Influx of people.
influx of people building it up. And like you said, at the very beginning of the city being created, it flourished. But then after a couple years or decades, whatever, it kind of died down. So it was a good way of bringing people, trappers in, getting activity there. And then it kind of died out because they're just like, shit, we're not catching it. We're not catching glimpses of this. I mean, I kind of like to believe it. But then again, like the whole March of the Nain Rouge, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like if you wanted to drive it out, more, if anything, I'd be like, you build the idol and then you take it out of the town and burn it or something like that. What did the French priests do? They cut it down, they burned it, and released it into the area, and now it's supposed to haunt them. So why would you do the same exact thing in the middle of Detroit? That's just keeping it there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't, man, I want to believe the Nain Rouge is real, but if I have to, you put a gun to my head, I'm going to say it's not. I mean, there's no colonial records from the 1700s that state that Cadillac's encounter with the Nain Rouge happened. There's no records of the French priest. All of that comes from the 1883 Hamlin book. And you have to think in the late 1800s, there was a trend in American cities to create like legendary histories to give places charm, prestige, and cultural depth. Detroit, compared to other cities like Boston or Philadelphia, lacked widely known mythology. And Hamlin wrote that book to make Detroit seem older, more mysterious, and more European, connect the city to noble French roots, and bring civic pride by giving Detroit its own folklore. And the Nain Rouge was not part of any real record of Cadillac's life. Hamlin invented the encounter to serve several narrative and symbolic purposes. She wanted to give Detroit a unique urban legend, turn Cadillac into a tragic, heroic figure, and explain Detroit's hardships through folklore, and appealed to the taste of 19th century readers. And I believe that she wrote it like that as a way to, boost the city. She wasn't a historian. She just told stories, and she profited and benefited personally from her book in 1883. She gained literary reputation, contributed to Detroit's identity, and it filled a cultural void. So, yeah, I think it was just made up by Hamlin, and everybody ran with it, which kind of sucks.
Kind of sucks. That's like me saying, back in the 1600s in Leander, Texas, there was a creature that went around and it was called the goat licker.
He went around and he licked people who worked hard in the fields each day that didn't take baths before before they got in the bed. The goat would go up and lick the bottom of their feet, licking the salt and sweat off of it until their feet were raw in the morning. They'd wake up with little nubs.
That's right. When
They'd
you're
be like,
sleeping,
I just got nubs. I can't walk.
when you're sleeping, it comes into your room through the window and bah, just licks your toes and your feet.
Yeah, that's what I believe, that the Nain Rouge was just made up. It sucks, but that's my belief.
I mean, it's fun to think about, and it's cool that they have like a tradition for Detroit where they have the march and all that, but
Debunked.
debunked. Get out of here.
But with that being said, if you or a loved one have encountered this cryptid, please comment down below or send us an email. We would love to hear from you.
Prove us wrong.
Yes.
Show us a picture of the little red guy.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, that is the end of today's episode. Do you have anything else you would like to add, Dan?
I do not.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. And again, thank you for your love and support. Without you, we could not do this.
That's right.
So, Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.